Greetings. My name is Murray Flagg. I'm the Director of Education, Spiritual Care, and Bereavement for Harmony Hospice in Tucson, Arizona. Really pleased that you are watching this video today. The title of it is An Introduction to the Gates of Grief. This material is based on a book by Francis Weller entitled The Wild Edge of Sorrow. So I'm going to invite you to join me for this trip very briefly through Francis Weller's materials, because we would encourage you to think about using it. So why an introduction to this book? You know, it's not normal that hospices are doing introductions to books, but in our work with our grief groups, we found that the material in this book has offered real insight and healing for many of our participants. And that's why we're recording this and preparing this so it's available. During the pandemic, studies have shown that everyone is suffering from anticipatory grief as well as other forms of emotional struggle. And Weller's material is designed to help us understand many aspects of grieving and of loss. And folks are experiencing that, whether it's the loss of a family member, a friend, whether it's the angst over the loss of thousands and thousands of lives across the world. With the political struggles that have been going on in the United States, economic struggles, losses of jobs, we are suffering a whole multitude of forms of grief. And they often impact us in ways we're not even aware. And we also carry grief that is not ours individually. And Weller does a great job of talking about that. He speaks to the underlying issues of grief that are often not aware of and the impact that they have with every fresh new loss. It's our hope that an introduction to these issues will assist the larger community in managing the impact that's being felt and the grief that is corporate and individual that's going on. So please enjoy this material. If you have questions, you can contact me at Harmony Hospice in Tucson. My email is mflagg@harmonyhospice.org. Again, mflagg@harmonyhospice.org. So grief is a journey, has been said by so many, and the only way to heal is to walk the path and enter all the various aspects of emotions and stages and experiences that the grief brings us. As in many journeys, we pass through various stages, and often there's a door or a gate that opens onto a new vista or realm. And this is the way that Weller approaches it. In this session, we're going to look at the 5 stages of grief. Now on the screen it says 6 because in our work, we pull out regret and remorse from the 2nd stage in Weller's material and make it a 6th gate because it is so powerful in dealing with our grief. And for many of us, regret and remorse can lead to guilt and can lead to depression and various difficulties. So we pull it out and make 6. But in Weller's material, there are 5 gates. And we're going to do a brief exploration of these. And hopefully you'll see how they impact you, your family, the community when it comes to loss and grief. And we would encourage you, if you find interest in this, to purchase Weller's book. We don't get any kickback. We don't have anything to do with Weller himself other than appreciating his material. But it is a very powerful book. It's a very rich book. It's a very poetic book in his way of writing, and can be explored on so many levels. So the gates are, the first gate is everything you love you will lose. Second, places inside you that have not known love. Third, sorrows of the world for what we expected and did not receive. And the 5th gate, ancestral grief, holding grief from our ancestors. As you can see from this, these are aspects of grief that, unless one has done a lot of work in deeper grief management and study, we don't really think about. These all play into our lives and we deal with them regularly. And as we say, Weller does a great job of unpacking this material, bringing it together, tying it. Most folks find that they have to read this book slowly to digest it and go back over it and over it. We use it in our materials because when we get to the higher level, many of our sessions later, up in our higher number of sessions, we find that this intense grief work helps people to understand how these experiences have shaped the way they do their own personal grief journey. So the first gate is everything we love, we will lose. And this is a quote from Weller. My grief says that I dare to love, and that I allowed another to enter into the very core of my being and find a home in my heart. We only grieve where there's relationship. And we have relationship with things that we love. That can even be our job. That can be family. That can be friends. That can be a place that we live. So many things that we find ourselves attached to and attract. And the truth is, we will lose everything that we love eventually. Even our own life. Even our own life comes to an end. As the material says on the screen, this is one of life's most difficult but essential teachings. Understanding that everything is a gift, but not everything lasts forever. Many indigenous people would tell you, except for the sun, the sky, and the stars. But there's evidence that the universe, even the universe, will eventually burn out. So we come to understand that. And when we understand that, it does set us up with expectations that can make it difficult for us. Everything that we love, we will lose. No exceptions. And grief says that I dare to love and allowed someone into my heart. If I didn't have a connection, if I didn't love, if I wasn't connected, I wouldn't grieve. Your grief is based in the truth that you had a relationship that was of value and intimate and powerful. And you grieve because you cared and loved. The reason we grieve is because we love, because we care. If we didn't care, if we didn't have relationship, we wouldn't care. We wouldn't grieve. We wouldn't feel this. But the truth is, when we love something, when we love someone, when we are attached to it, when we find pleasure and power and truth in it, when we lose it, when we're separated from it, we grieve. We grieve emotionally, which impacts us in our physical nature, our spiritual nature, our mental nature, and our emotional nature. And we grieve in all of those aspects. But the first truth, and it's a hard truth, and none of us like it, that we will lose everything that we love. The second gate in Weller's material is the places that have not known love. We become convinced that there are pieces of who we are that are in fact shameful or bad. We all have places in our being that have been banished to the far shores of our lives. These may be places of shame or lack of self-worth or issues of insecurity. Because they're held in contempt and refuse the light, they are denied healing or the salve of grief. No matter who we are, there are places in us, there are places in our existence, in our life, in the stories that we've been told, in the life we have lived, in the lessons that have been given us that say these are not good things, or things that we know that we have done that were not good, that are in our lives, and we are afraid, we're ashamed of them. They're hurtful. And so they don't have light, and we don't deal with them. And that's part of in this material in his book where he deals with regret and remorse. The things that we would have done, the things that we wish we hadn't done. And they're in there, and they're often in that dark place, and we don't deal with them, and we haven't dealt with them. And that pain continues to exist. That pain continues to form us and drive us and bring us difficulty and bring us loss and bring separation. Because we perceive these as defects of character or actions, we cannot grieve them as we hold them outside the circle of worth. The circle of worth. That which we hold, that which we love, we feel worthy of, we want to bring in and we want to deal with it. But we don't want to deal with those things out there. And so we push them away. When we acknowledge one or more of these, grieving becomes possible and healing is at hand. It's pulling them out of the dark, bringing them into the light, sorting through them, being honest about them, looking at them, feeling the pain. The truth is, from the moment of our birth to the moment of our death, we seek to avoid pain and embrace pleasure. It's a natural human instinct, and all human beings have it. And we seek to avoid pain and embrace pleasure. And these things are painful. They're nasty. They smell. They stink. They're ugly. And we don't want to deal with them. And as long as we don't deal with them, they continue to be there and fester and bring pain. And pain not transformed is transmitted. Always. Pain not transformed is transmitted either into ourselves or into others or into relationships or into all sorts of aspects of life. So when we look at this, are there things or places that have not known love? Are there places in our relationships where we have lost the love that was there? Lost love that's not foundational sometimes, or where we failed to love. And acknowledging us allows us to grieve them. No relationship is perfect. Doesn't matter. No relationship is perfect. There are flaws. And we sometimes want to paper over them. That's different than acknowledging. That's different than addressing and understanding. Not all things can be changed. Jimmy Buffett, in one of his songs off the coast of Carolina, says, "And the walls that won't come down, we can decorate or climb or find some way around, because I'm still on your side." When we acknowledge the problems, when we acknowledge these areas, maybe we can't get rid of them, but we can look at them differently. We can address them. We can find a way around them when we're still willing to work on the relationship and working to bring it. And we want to do this to heal even where the relationship is ended, where we have lost a loved one. We can still deal with these things even when they're not present, and it can bring healing. We want to make sure that the places that have not known love do know them, by being dealt with, by being brought into the light, by being looked at, by being adjusted, by feeling the pain and then seeing it differently and transforming it, so that these places are no longer shameful, they're no longer harmful, they're no longer broken, they're no longer separating, they're no longer keeping us from moving forward or from enriching relationships. So we want to be able to address them. The third gate is the gate for the sorrows of the world. This is a feeling of emptiness where a beautiful, strange otherness should have been encountered, in Weller's words. Isn't that a great understanding? A feeling of emptiness where a beautiful and strange otherness should have been encountered. We are all consciously aware or not, much of the grief that we carry impacts our personal loss because it's communal. We share the losses of the world. We share the sorrow of the world. Right now, with this pandemic, as I'm recording this, we are dealing with the losses of life. We're dealing with the loss of normalcy. We're dealing with the loss of being close to those we love. We're dealing with the reality that thousands upon thousands of people have died. And for some of you who will be watching this, family and friends you have lost. We're dealing with the separation that is caused, and not being able to be with them, but also the loss to the world, the losses that we experience, the tragedy, the collected grief. We feel the losses of communities. We feel the losses of individuals. We feel the losses of species in the world that have been lost. There's so many things that are lost. And it has been said, no person is an island separate unto themselves. John Donne, I'm sure, would allow me to change that from no man to no person without any problem. So unless we acknowledge this load of world grief and sorrow, we bring these issues into our personal grief journey. And often we have this feeling of ennui, this feeling of otherness, this feeling of separation. We don't even know where it comes from. And often it is tied to this sorrow that we feel for so much brokenness, for so much loss, for so many people being disenfranchised, being abused, being these things play into us. And we carry that, and we carry that grief. And it burdens us and it wears us down, and it stops the world from being the wonderful place that we could perceive it to be, because there is sorrow. And unless we deal with it, we can't really experience the fullness of joy that would come with this. So we ask ourselves, what world issues do you perceive that are impacting your grief journey? And how might admitting these in your consciousness assist you in a present grief journey? Or to just assist you in living your life richer? When we take the time, when we take the courage to really address, to really look at these things and acknowledge them and feel that pain, to feel the pain of loss, of so many things around us, so much brokenness, so much tragedy that we hear and we look, and even more than it used to be, because now with instantaneous news, 24-hour news cycle, the worldwide net, this instantaneous communication that has not been with us for that long, we're constantly bombarded with this tragedy and loss in the world, and it impacts us and it weighs on us. The fourth gate that Weller presents us is what we expected and did not receive. How do we even know that we missed these expectations? This realization calls forth grief, as he says for us. This gate opens onto a vista of sorrow and the things that may never even be realized that were lost. Centuries of intimate communal living have programmed our souls and our hearts and our minds to anticipate being welcomed into the world, to experience our birthright, to be fully accepted and supported in family, community, the whole world. We expect to have rich, sensuous relationships that keep us connected to the others, the divine and the creation. But the truth is, as a friend of mine who was a marriage and family therapist used to say, no one gets out of childhood undamaged, because children are just too fragile and human adults are just too broken and flawed. And the truth is, we have these things, and we also have the pictures that are painted by Disney and by other people of living happily ever after and all the joy that will come and all these wonderful things. And we have this expectation that family is going to be so accepting and loving, and often that isn't the case. And even when they try, there's failure, and it breaks us. We have an expectation that the divine, how we understand the divine, is going to always be with us, and we don't necessarily always sense that. And that the entire creation should be one, and yet we find that not the case, because there is hate, there is alienation, there is violence, there is brokenness. And the absence in our lives haunts us. Even when we cannot give them a name, we feel their loss and ache for the completion that does not come. The world is a broken place because it's made up of broken individuals. And we have this vision, this dream of what we hope for. And as children, we come in and we carry that into our adult life. And so often, those dreams are shattered. The things that we expected in relationships, we expect a relationship to play out some way, and it doesn't come together exactly as we envisioned it. Or there are flaws in it that cause us loss, and a sense of loss, and a sense of incompleteness, and a sense of brokenness and pain. We don't often allow ourselves to admit that in our personal, intimate relationships, there are unfulfilled expectations. And the grief that with the loss of our loved one, or the loss of a relationship, or the loss of a community, leaves us with an aching void. But are we willing or able to acknowledge and explore these for healing? The truth is, no relationship is perfect. And yet we have expectations of a perfect relationship. People enter into marriage with this idea of a certain way, and then the reality of being who we are. We enter into a job, and it doesn't play out exactly as we envisioned it. We're part of a community, and there are flawed people in that community. And we ache for this completeness, for this joy, for this fulfillment. But the way we get there is to acknowledge this loss, to acknowledge the brokenness, to acknowledge the pain, and then to transform it. The fifth gate is an interesting one. It's the ancestral gate. And what is not transformed is transmitted. And we are all product of our historic stories. This gate opens on to all the old, happens onto all the old grief that we carry in our bodies from sorrow experienced by our ancestors, by our elders, by those who have gone before us. It also opens up onto the abuses of those who have been exploited and mistreated of memory. The long shadow of these immense issues is hard to even comprehend and scars our psyches. We are all product of the stories that we have been told and have learned and have heard. And those stories shape us. And in those stories, we hear the grief of things lost. We hear the grief of relationships lost. We hear the grief of people who've been mistreated and abused, people who have been rejected. And those stories carry over and they shape us. And that grief gets embedded into us. We also grieve over our ancestors who are no longer with us, here to guide us and support us. We miss their stories, their wisdom and comfort. Some of you will be familiar with the StoryCorps project that has been done by the Smithsonian, where they went around the country, and they still do now if you go to the Smithsonian, recording brief stories told by individuals. And often it's somebody interviewing others. And one of the stories that struck me so powerfully was a young woman talking about an experience her grandmother had had as a woman who was a servant in the South before the equal rights treatment, before these things. And this woman, the woman who was the woman she worked for, was getting rid of makeup, gave her a bunch of makeup. She went home rejoicing. She painted her nails. She dressed up. She went to church feeling just lovely and wonderful, enjoying this. And on Monday, she had forgotten to take off the fingernail polish. And this was in the deep South. And she went to the store, and the man in the store grabbed her hand, called her an abusive name, and asked her what she thought she was with her fingers painted. And then this individual proceeded to pull out her fingernails one by one with a pair of pliers. Now, this young woman had never lived in that, had never experienced anything like that, but she carried the pain and the trauma of this ancestor's story that had been passed down to her through the family. And that grief for that, she carries in herself. And we all have those things, those stories of loss and of mistreatment and of things that have been wrong to our family, and the stories that we hear, and they shape us, and they shape, and we carry that grief in us. And unless we address it, it's there and it impacts the way we do our grief. And then we grieve the loss of that wisdom, of the stories, of the guidance, of those ancestors, those people that, of our family, of our friends, our mentors who've gone, who are no longer there to help us and guide us. And we grieve those things as well. And all of this grief is multiplied in our life. We are exiles, as he says, from the past, and love known, and often that which we cannot even name. We cannot even name those things that are there that we don't even know for sure what they are. But they've been passed down to us, and we've inherited them. And we feel that as well. For questions, further information, or schedule of Harmony Hospice grief groups and that, contact me at Murray Flagg at mflagg@harmonyhospice.org. This has just been a brief introduction to this Weller material that we have found to be so helpful for many people, and that's one of the reasons we put it up. Weller's book, The Wild Edge of Sorrow. If you have questions, or if you're interested in a grief group, if you need that, or if you are looking for this material and you need help in finding it, please do email me. Thank you for watching this video. Hopefully this material and hopefully this time will help you in dealing with the losses that you're feeling, the losses that we're all feeling. Studies are showing us now that in this pandemic, we are all dealing with anticipatory grief, and that many of us, a great many of us, are going to be suffering PTSD because of the trauma we've witnessed, the trauma we've lived through. And so we need to do this work. And we at Harmony are happy to do the work with you, have you in a group, or recommend to you a counselor, or recommend to you other groups. But we do recommend to you Francis Weller's book, The Wild Edge of Sorrow, because it is deep, it is rich, and it has great material to provide help and assistance in your life's journey and healing for the grief and the pain that you experience. Thank you for being with us. Hopefully this material is helpful. Again, peace, grace, and aloha to you all.